Hope you all had a time to review the agenda, and I'd like to ask, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Okay, we'll go with the agenda we have. We did receive a revision yesterday, so I hope you all received that. The minutes of the April 23rd meeting are included in the packet. Are there any corrections? Oh, boy. Yep.
I would move to approve the minutes.
We moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Anybody opposed? Motion passes. We'll moving on. Do we have any introductions this morning? If not from the group, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Brooks Racky as she serves as the Vice President of Academic Affairs. She brings a wealth of experience and a deep commitment to advancing higher education in Kansas. Her distinguished and clear career includes leadership role as president of St. Martin's University, provost and vice president for academic affairs at St. Norbert College, and dean of graduate school and office of scholarship and sponsored projects at Fort Hays State University. Dr. Bonzaraki earned her PhD and master's in experimental psychology from Kansas State University and her bachelor's degree from Christian Brothers University. So, Dr. Right, would you please stand? Welcome. At this time, I'd like to recognize Dr. Blake Flanders. Dr. Flanders has been in higher education in Kansas for decades, and I've known him a long time, and so probably have many of you, certainly since his work here at the board office, and even when he was at a college. Native Kansan, I think, graduated from Colby and Kansas State, if I remember right. So Blake is retiring this year, but this is our last meeting before he retires. So I wanted to recognize him this morning and give him an opportunity to talk. Blake, I consider a good friend. I was able to call on him many times when I was a president, and always got a straight answer. Not always the answer I wanted, but I got a straight answer. So, Blake. Right.
Well, how long do we have? Because it's kind of dangerous to give me the microphone. I'll just take a couple of minutes. I'm really excited and proud of where we are now from where we started. And many of you, I know Cindy was in industry and Ray was in industry at the time, and then later became part of the system too. We really had we really were at a point of time where certainly career technical education didn't have the level of respect it needed and didn't have the funding and support that it really needed. And we didn't have a direct line of sight for any policymakers to really invest. You know, we had kind of some discombobulated formulas where it was base plus 1% or something like that, and it just didn't really work. And this group is the one that did all the work in terms of developing, you know, the tiered model, recognizing there were different costs, promoting career and technical education. I think now there's just been a renaissance and a recognition, you know, of those of careers that are meaningful, that matter, that really pay off for Kansans. And that's been kind of exciting to see the whole way through. And, it's just been great to be a part of it. And I will say that I think what's really exciting to me is going to be what you're able to do in the next few years. Because, you know, we can't just set, we need to take the next step. And the next step is we have better data now than we've ever had before. We actually can see which careers are working out for students, which programs should we fund. At the beginning here, we funded all programs because, you know, we didn't have as much information as we do now. So are there pathways that are working better for students that we need to invest in? We know that the dollars aren't ever going to be limitless like we'd like for it to be. But that's not going to be the case, nor should it be the case. So you have an opportunity to also look at, I know the institutions are very interested in this, to look at performance funding. And so which institutions are getting better outcomes? And then I think as funding begins to follow performance, then all boats start to rise, because people look and say, hey, what are you doing to get better outcomes? And that starts to go throughout the system. So I'm really excited to see from kind of a different perch what you do the next 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. I think some really exciting times are ahead for you. But I've enjoyed working with all of you and being a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Please. Any other comments by the members?
I'll start. Just to Blake, make Blake nervous to think that I'm going to start this off. But, first of all, I'm just glad he didn't have to die before we said all these nice things. We tend to wait till the person's gone and tell them how wonderful they were. So I'm glad we're having this opportunity today. The first time I met Blake, I think it was the first time when I was in 2010, when I stepped into the role at WATC. You mentioned that. And one of the first meetings that we had on campus at NCAT was the staff, all the presidents of the 2-year sector, and they were been working on curriculum alignment throughout the state. Rita, you remember that because you were there too. And so I sat there as the first time in a meeting with all these other, presidents, and looked at the board and the flow charts that they had, and they've been meeting for some time. And I finally said, this is all backwards. I still say, after I made that comment, Clark Coco said, who let the plumber in? But he said he denied that though. But I was so glad after making that comment, because it looked like to me from business and industry was at the end of a process. In other words, here we've done all these smart people have done this work. Now business and industry, just bless it, okay? And we hadn't really secured and gotten input from them. So I was glad at least that Blake didn't kick me out of the room at that point. And I have Rita to thank for that, because I know Rita made him behave, didn't you? And that wasn't just the only time you made him behave. But anyway, but what I did learn from, the relationship over the years with Blake, and it started that day, was to have, this is a person of character. Someone that is a role model for the rest of us, how we should be conducting our lives. And what I appreciate about Blake is his display of humility, but also the leadership and being a voice of reason when it's necessary. So I would say, Blake, thank you for your years of service. Wish you the best. And as you move on, I often tell these young hotshot guys that I meet with, never stop becoming, because you don't know what God has for you around that next corner. And I say, just be ready and willing. So Blake, best to you. And thank you for being a good friend.
Right, it's difficult to follow that. I had a lot of jokes about Blake, but our relationship started when Blake was a livestock judging coach back at Butler Community College, and has grown since then, and obviously reconnected in his role at the Department of Commerce many years as the liaison between the two agencies. But I strongly believe, and Secretary Tolan wanted me to emphasize this, that without Blake in our education system, we wouldn't have been able to land several of our big high profile projects because education has always been at the table. And I honestly believe, and the secretary agrees, that without Blake's influence in that role, we wouldn't have been as successful as we've been over the past 7 or 8 years. So thank you, Blake, for your partnership. And on behalf of Secretary Tolan, thank you also.
If I may, this is Tiffany Anderson and Dr. Flanders, President Flanders, you've been instrumental in the K-12 sector. I'm just going to mention a few highlights. I know many people know the tremendous work that you've done, but I can remember when you came to my office and sat down with me before I was on this board and leading up to this space. And but your alignment, which you just talked about a little bit, between workforce development and education and industry, is transformed really the community, but also K-12 and what it looks like to lead into CTE. In fact, for us, having the 30, almost 30 CTE scholars this year is remarkable for Topeka, but we would not have been able to do that if it weren't for your work. Your advocation for more funding for higher education in Kansas, again, direct impact to K-12, promoting the partnerships between universities and businesses, student retention and graduation, the expansion of online learning programs. I mean, it can go on and on. I think your legacy will continue far beyond you leaving from the role, and I and many other superintendents are forever grateful. So thank you, and congratulations on your transition and retiring from this role, and thank you for all the work you've done.
Any other comments from members? Well, thank you, Blake, and we wish you well to whatever your future plans. It's sitting on the bank fishing or playing golf or whatever. But thank you for your years of service. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. We'll move into reports. The chair does not have a report this morning unless you want to hear about grandkid graduation and music programs and that kind of thing. So that's what I've been busy with the last month. So are there any reports from TEA members?
So following today's meeting, I'm headed to, I believe it's the 98th Annual FFA State Convention in Manhattan. So I welcome you all to come see the great things our students are doing. We support 8 career and technical student organizations, and they're the 8th to have their state convention and the last to wrap up the year. Then we'll have all of the state officers come to Topeka June 8th and 9th for state officer leadership training.
Recently, I had the opportunity, I met with Eric Burks, president of Fort Hays Tech North Central in Hays, and he invited me out to tour their new facility, the Hanson Construction Center, Career Center in Hays. And I have to say, I was, we got a glimpse of that in a committee meeting with some PowerPoint, but to be inside and see, what a big step this is forward for Eric and for North Central Tech is pretty amazing. And so we walked through the facility. It was interesting to see, but also rewarding to see the list of business and industry partners on display and throughout the building, actually. That shared in the success of the completion of that facility. And also it was impressing to see and hear that not only did many of these businesses contribute in the construction, actually hands-on work, but also many of them, in addition to that, made a financial contribution to the facility as well. So it was rewarding. Oh, another thing that he toured on that day on campus, they, as you know, they construct homes and then auction them off. And they had 2 there. One was a single family And the second one was supposed to be a single family, but they turned it into a duplex. So they were finishing those up. And I think they've already had an auction of at least one, maybe two of those homes, and one from Beloit as well. So I would say, congratulations to Eric and his team for, the good work they're doing on their Hayes campus.
Any other member reports?
Dave, this is Deb
Deborah?
McCulkin. Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. I just wanted to say, I had the pleasure of attending at one of my assigned schools, the graduation at Labette Community College. And it was a wonderful event. And it was so exciting to see not only all of the technical education programs and all the nursing accomplishments, the nursing program accomplishments, and all of the programs, but just being with the students and the excitement of parents that when students do accomplish those goals, they hit those graduation targets. It's not just the student, it's the family and it's the greater community that supports them. It was a wonderful time at Labette Community College for that graduation.
Thank you. Any other members?
And I'll follow Member McCulca. And on that same vein, I guess two things. This is Dr. Henderson. And first of all, Dean Smathers just did an extraordinary job in his graduation. I think over 800 young people were graduating from Washburn Tech. Truly a full house. So I got a chance to attend that. And as has already been said, it's great seeing all the families excited about young people going directly into the workforce and family members going into the workforce. On that same note, if you're around Topeka on Friday, June 12th, Washburn Tech is also going to be celebrating their cosmetology, Academy of Cosmetology, and they're moving it to North Topeka, which is really fantastic. It's a community that really needs and has continued to expand some opportunities right there in North Topeka. So it's just wonderful that they are moving that there. And June 12th is the celebration for that. And I'm sure some more information will be coming out to you. But just want to thank Dean Smathers and Washburn Tech team for all they're doing.
Thank you.
Scott, did she read that just like you wrote it?
If there are no other reports, we'll turn to Vice President White for an update on board staff activities.
Thank you, Chair Rice. Over the past month, I attended the Advanced CTE Spring meeting with Member Clark, Director Martinez, and Director Brown, and participated in the SHEO Prison Education convening alongside Dr. Flanning with the Kansas Department of Corrections. With the help of Dr. Bonds-Racky, we also are working on the Rural Talent Pipeline. Meetings were held in Emporia, Dodge City, and Hayes. We did receive feedback. I'm not sure we've gotten the official feedback from the group putting that on, but we will then be working with our colleges on how do we develop those middle skill pathways. We continue to work with the Department of Corrections on the Fair Chance to Advance initiative. We also are working with KDHE on the Rural Health Transformation Program to strengthen healthcare across rural Kansas. Obviously, we have been working with our data team on how do we implement all the changes from the legislature into our data collections. So we do want to appreciate them, thank them for all their work. We also have been working with Amber and Greg and Steve and Heather on questions that have come in regarding those pieces of legislation and how it's going to impact moving forward. So I appreciate your guys' help crafting those responses. Looking ahead to the summer, we are doing a multi-state adult ed LACES training. So that's a nationwide system to collect adult ed information. In June, we are holding a workforce development webinar on how to submit brand new programs. And we will also hold a joint adult ed and Perkins meeting over the summer. It's an annual meeting where we get together and try to work better together. And finally, unfortunately, Hector Martinez is not here. He had some family emergency he had to attend, but I wanted to make everyone aware that as of July 1st, he will begin his 2-year term as the president of the Coalition of Adult Basic Education. We call that COABE for short. It's represents about 80,000 people who work in the adult ed sector and hundreds of thousands of students. So he will be busy with that, but representing Kansas at a national level. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Moving on, President Noachian, the Cloud County Community College, report for the community colleges.
Good morning. I know we have a really full agenda, so I'll try to keep this quick. But as you all have kind of mentioned, all of us have just finished graduation ceremonies. And I always say that I have two favorite days. One is enrollment day, when the students come in and you get to see them, kind of the fear and the apprehension in their eyes. And then getting to see them walk across the stage at the end is pretty fulfilling as a president. So a really exciting time of year. Our report this month really focuses on our impact on economic development in our local communities, which is so important. Several have touched on already. We have done an economic impact study in 21-22 for all community colleges. So we did it as a sector, and then we each got our own for our institutions. And we plan on doing that again this next year because it is really important, especially legislatively and in our own communities, being able to share the impact that we have. And so you'll see on there the total impact of Kansas community colleges is $6.7 billion and added income and nearly 100,000 jobs or 110,000 jobs supported. Just some highlights from the report itself. You'll see some of the institutions focused on some business training and some educational stuff. Barton, in their relationship with Case New Holland. Colby has the only dental hygiene and PT assistant programs in Western Kansas. Cowley's Sim Lab for EMS, but also for criminal justice. Garden City's relationship with Empirical Foods. Neosho with Spirit Aero Systems, and also Horizon Aerostructures for the sheet metal assembly lab. Seward CDL has 100% pass rate for the last 2 years, which is incredible. Another thing that I saw as a kind of a theme throughout the report was just that our alumni or graduates predominantly stay in Kansas, but a very large percentage, in a lot of cases 80%, stay in our actual service area. And so I think that's very telling for the work that we all do. I know that's kind of embedded in the Tech Colleges report as well. And also thank you to April and Charmin and the KBOR staff in helping us work through the legislative changes. Many of our institutions have met with our local superintendents and then also our high school counselors and coordinators as well to work through those. And so we appreciate the guidance and support from your staff as well. And that concludes my report, but I would stand for any questions at this time.
President Nichols, Salina Tech.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Kansas Technical Colleges. Again, in light of brevity for the large agenda that we have, graduations across the state, most of our colleges saw significant milestones for their institutions, largest graduating classes for many of us. That's a testament to the great people at work at the colleges and the great students that, seek to improve their life and their livelihood. In that light, there are a lot of our programs that when they graduate, they actually go out and get jobs that really help the Kansas economy. In the report, it talks a little bit about Manhattan Tech has a program that their students come out averaging $60,000 a year annual income. Many of our programs offer that or even a little bit more than that as a new graduate coming out into the workforce. That's pretty tremendous. So when we talk about high demand, high wage, critical need areas, those are important. Some of the highlights that are also important in the report, it talked a little bit about communication. I think Dr. Anderson also talked about Washburn Tech communicating with their schools and their service area to make sure that any of the legislative changes that we've seen, we're communicating that with our educational partners. That work goes on so many times and it's not really noted, but it's important to really highlight that. There's great work being done all across the state in our sector, working with the K-12 partners, working with university partners to make sure that students have that opportunity to upskill and continue their education. I would be remiss if I didn't kind of provide some of those individualized opportunities that, for example, at Flint Hills Technical College, they have a student, let me see what her name was. Yeah, Skills USA, hospitality and culinary arts. Jessica True will be competing on the national stage. I know there are others from the state of Kansas that will be going to Skills USA. That is tremendous. If you've never had that opportunity, it's like, oh, what is it? Banana ball. You go and it's the most entertaining 2 hours of your life. And you don't even really necessarily have to watch the baseball game, but you go and it's entertaining, it's energetic. And that's kind of what Skills is for the trade programs and the technical programs that are across the nation. So it's great to see that experience. National Signing Day across the state. Many of our colleges have really emphasized that signing day, telling the students that are in technical education, you're wanted and valued. The industry wants you. So I know Washburn Tech has celebrated that for, I think, 13 years, right? And across the state, many of the technical colleges are participating in that. That's broadcast nationally. So live at each of these campuses, you have students that are signing, we're coming here, we're wanted, we're valued. And I think that's tremendous. So as President Knutson mentioned, many of our students do graduate and stay in the state of Kansas, which is tremendous. Not everybody does because honestly, they're very highly valued and some other states really need that workforce as well. So we're typically graduating a high percentage, and I wouldn't say 100%, of course, but most of our colleges have upper 80s, 90% of those students staying in our region or in the state of Kansas. So it's a tremendous return on investment from the state dollars, from economic development. And so that concludes my report. If I could answer any questions, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you, Presidents. Always find those reports interesting, the good things that are happening at our 26 schools out there. Moving on to the consent agenda, it looks like we have 6 items from Program and Curriculum Committee. Member Bean, do you have any comments regarding those items?
Don't have any comments necessarily. As you mentioned, there's 6 items on the consent agenda. Program approval, certificate program approval, Promise Scholarship, Excellency TE fees, and then we had a discussion about tiered and non-tiered funding status. If there aren't any questions or concerns, I'll move to approve the 6 items on the consent agenda.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ray. Anybody opposed? Motion approved. Moving on to discussion agenda. I'd like to call on Dr. Vera Brown to walk us through the technical college operating grant objectives.
Good morning. How's everyone today? I have a presentation while we're pulling this up. This year, Budget and Finance Committee, technical colleges, and board staff worked together to develop a process for Senate Bill 2195, which established the Kansas Technical College Operating Grant. This work corresponds to the Goal 5 of the TEA for the 2025-2026 academic year. We are very grateful for this fruitful collaboration. This is a new process, and we appreciate everyone's patience and support. And because this is a new process, we are providing a summary today for the full TEA for your review and consideration. Before we get started, I would like to verify that it is okay to vote on all of the college's proposals all at the same time at the end. Would that be the wish of the TEA? Great. The Budget and Finance Committee received a thorough report from each college in March and April, and I believe we have most of the technical college presidents either here, thank you for making the trip, or on Zoom to answer any specific questions. As much as I would love to believe I know everything, I do not, so I appreciate the assistance. With the process of development of the application guidelines and TEA schedule, this process came later this year than we would like to. So at the end, we would also like for you to consider a different timeline, and we will talk about that. Forms submitted by the colleges start on page 43 of your packet if you'd like to follow along. So the 2195 legislation was enacted in 2025 and establishes the Kansas Technical College Operating Grant Fund, and it will be administered by KBOR. And it also states that all expenditures from the fund shall be for instruction and operations to meet target objectives established by the TEA for each college. So that is why we're here. Each college has received $1 million, $7 million divided equally among all technical colleges. And the two categories were considered for those expenditures, either instruction or operations. The definitions are provided here and were also provided in previous packets. Essentially, it's either provided for instruction in the classroom or the overall operation of the college. For the approval process, the Budget and Finance Committee considered every college's proposal. In March and April, have received those reports. We're bringing this to the TEA today. In July, technical colleges will submit their reports on the results of the activities, and in August, the TEA will consider and review the results. Going forward, the Budget and Finance Committee and the technical colleges agree that this timeline is a little late. So we would like in August, in addition to the results, provide the new proposed goals so that it starts out the fiscal year with a plan rather than a report. We will go through each college quickly. I know we have a busy agenda today. Flint Hills Technical College has set objectives for faculty, administration, and staff salary increases, building purchase for CDL and precision agriculture, classroom and lab renovations, IT supports, projectors, document cameras, increase in facilities, capacity, boiler and roof replacements, and maintenance of building construction. And they've provided some images if you'd like to review some of those. These are some images of lab spaces. There's CDL truck training with a very nice wrap. We like to see that. Some of the new building construction, IT support, and roof replacements. Next, we'll go on to the Fort Hays Tech North Central. The funds were utilized for faculty retention bonuses, staff retention bonuses, core campus student data management system, and Member Frederick already mentioned Hanson Construction Career Center. That is a very impressive building, even just from images. I hope to go get to see it soon. And that is a gratitude wall that you mentioned, Member Frederick, as well, with the names of sponsors that made this possible. I always like to see tied together naming and colors. It just makes the spaces welcoming for students. These are some of the lab spaces and equipment that was able to be provided with the funds. I believe President Burks also mentioned that the funds were used as a match for another large grant that they received for the Heavy Equipment Operations Program, which is a great assistance to the institution, as well as employee retention bonuses for their staff. Next is Fort Hays Tech Northwest. There were several things accomplished by this institution. There was support provided for CDL, Auto Tech, Precision Ag programs and facilities. There were new programs implemented. There was expansion of mechanical engineering curriculum, marketing and branding enhancements with the joining of Fort Hays Tech, Northwest, North Central, and Fort Hays State University. There was innovative passive home construction to supplement grant funds. There was an on-campus childcare center construction and updates, campus security support, student housing, maintenance facilities, and other campus updates. And we can see that CDL, and these are passive homes that are being built. And this is the Child Care Center. The Manhattan Area Technical College invested their funds into Advanced Technology Center building construction. And these are some images from the opening of the center, and that center will provide meeting spaces, classroom spaces, as well as lab spaces. And I apologize, everyone did such great job presenting. I feel like I am only giving a short summary, so please feel free to interrupt. I believe we have some presents on Zoom as well, if you have things to add. Salina Area Technical College modernized dental clinic in their 3D dental system, purchased auto collision equipment and painting simulator, provided laptop computers for staff, acquired a college server, purchased industrial maintenance automation trainers, and obtained a new student information system. Oh my. I don't know why, but it's it's really this is the view of Salina Tech campus as you enter it now, which we got to experience just recently from visiting campuses. For the equipment purchases, you have some images here displaying the dental, auto collision, and industrial maintenance trainers. The IT infrastructure has been, I think, on the mind of all of us, and the requirements that we now have to safeguard student systems, and as well as computing needs and student information system needs. Okay, moving on to Washburn Institute of Technology. We already mentioned Dr. Anderson mentioned the Washburn Tech North campus facility, which will house electrical technology, cosmetology, industrial machine maintenance, business and industry groups, including a FAME program. And this is, I think, Dean Smathers showed us some pictures a few weeks ago, but it's even in 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, it is already changing. So see, these are some of the spaces that that are going to be at the campus or are already in the campus. Sometimes it's hard to tell if it's a rendition, if it's real. Is it real? It's real. Okay, it's real. It's happening. Very nice. And so also classroom spaces, meeting spaces, as well as a cosmetology program already has space to move into. And also very clean shops so far. We'll get there. Wichita State University campus of Applied Science and Technology has invested the funds into the National Center for Aviation Training Building Expansion Project. On the personal note, I've been to the center before the expansion, and it was already very impressive. So this is great to see. Can't wait to get to visit. As we've heard from President Utash, this is a key addition to the aviation training programs. It will increase capacity, embeds industry in the center of program design, and will deliver measurable outcomes in workforce placement and economic impact. Just a quick glance at the renderings of the indoor facilities that are being built. It's affecting several programs with the projected growth of 450 annually and a 3-year growth target of 1,000 annually for programs like robotics, industrial automation, and smart manufacturing, and other programs looking forward to the needs of the industry. Next steps for us is a great news that the allocation for fiscal year 27 is $7 million again for the technical colleges in this fund. In August, Budget and Finance Committee review will include proposals for fiscal year 27 objectives as well as results for 26. And then we will bring that information to the August TEA to review and vote on so that we can start out the year earlier than this time and give the colleges enough time to work on their projects. I'll stand for questions.
Couple comments. President Nichols, is the tech colleges okay with the new time frame?
Yes, we are very amenable to that.
Okay. And then secondly, just, I don't know if it's a question, but comment. As a former administrator, it makes me nervous when I see the funds being used for salaries and benefits. Not that it's not needed, but this allocation used to be 10 million, now it's 7. If that ever goes away, I hope there's a plan in place to take care of that or something.
Yeah, if I could comment on that. Most of the colleges that are using instructional salaries or benefits, they are understanding that it's a temporary basis. And so many of them have looked at it from the standpoint of it's a one-time payment, one-time bonus, or it's something that, for example, is a help to start up the program, and they're going to operate, they're going to continue that with operational funds afterwards. But yeah, we're fully aware that if this money goes away, then you have to figure out a way to either replace it or you have to reorganize or do something. So yeah, some of us have made that commitment and said, okay, and others are like, we're not putting any of that to operational funds that are going to be recurring.
And we don't need a motion on this, it's a report, right?
I believe that we do need a motion and a vote.
Oh, okay.
please.
That's what I was thinking too. So I would move that we accept the various programs for vendors.
Any second?
I'll second that.
Okay, second. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Next up, we have Vice President Frisbee on fiscal year 2026 appropriation and Excel and TT and AOK.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to be here today. This is an action item for you to address a shortfall we talked about last September, I believe, for Excel and CTE and for Accelerating Opportunity Kansas. Okay, so you'll notice some tables starting on page 54 and moving over into page 55 and 56. There was a shortfall in state funding for fiscal year 2026, the current year, for the two programs. The legislature did a number of things in the appropriation language to address that. They did lapse the funding in our account for business partnerships and for student success related to Johnson County Community Colleges state aid. So there was a lapse of funding for that. And then there was a $6.2 million addition made. So we're taking those amounts in those tables to array them across institutions to make everyone whole for their current year appropriations for Excel and CTE and for AOK. We will have roughly $1 million left over. So the amount of new funding that we were provided for Excel and CTE was actually in excess of what we needed to make everyone whole. So that will just carry over to next year to be used for fiscal year 2027. So I would happy to stand for questions.
Questions?
So for clarification on timing, for the person who can't keep these fiscal years straight, this is for payment for July of 25 through July of 26.
The payment is for this year, yes, for July 25, June 26, but it's for the enrollments that happened in the year prior. So 24 through 25.
But actual work completed in
Fiscal year 2025. So the courses were delivered in fiscal year 25, and the state reimburses the colleges in fiscal year 2026 in this case.
Okay, so that's very confusing, just to let you know, for those of us who are less familiar. Okay, so work done in fiscal year 25. Okay,
This will make everyone whole for that.
got it. Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Sorry, one more question.
Okay.
Apologies. So is it, when you say you're making everyone whole, you just did an equal distribution, or was it a distribution based on their actual needs that were submitted?
Thank you for that question. The state aid is calculated based on actual courses delivered to students. And when we met last September, we did an equal proration. We didn't look at particular programs or try to do anything other than everyone was reduced by the same percentage. So everyone took the same hit on their finances. This will bring everyone then to that 100% state reimbursement.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve?
Well, since I asked all the questions, I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, second,
Second.
seconded. Anybody opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving on, Vice President Frisbee again, guide us through FY 27 appropriations of for community and tech colleges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking forward then, again, from legislation enacted by the legislature, House Bill 2513, the mega appropriation bill provided state funding for the usual programs administered by the Board of Regents to distribute state aid to the technical colleges and community colleges. Our tiered and non-tiered tables are listed first. That provides 100% of the state funding we talked about back at the January, I believe it was, December or January, meeting of the Tech Ed Authority, when we talked about the instructional cost model. So this is full funding, using the calculated state aid amounts for the two-year colleges, but on a 3-year rolling average. 3-year rolling average. I want to make that clear. So it isn't for Excel and CTE, there is no averaging across years, but for the tiered and non-tiered, our tradition is that there is a 3-year rolling average. So those are the amounts that you see there for tiered and non-tiered. Also, funding of $12.4 million was provided for CAPTA outlay state aid. That is the same amount has been given for 24, 25, and 26. As we just talked about, the technical college operating grant on page 60 is held flat from 26 at $7 million. So each technical college will receive $1 million. Of course, in 24 and 25 fiscal years, that was $10.5 million. The legislature did provide full funding of the Kansas Campus Restoration Act, which is a relatively newer program. Every coordinated institution, including Washburn Tech and Washburn University both, they all receive $100,000. So that money can be used to renovate a building, improve ADA access, fix an elevator, whatever needs to be done for a campus building. The business and industry and apprenticeship distribution is noted there on page 62. Again, $14.3 million was appropriated both in 26 and 27, but again, Johnson County was not eligible for their 26 state aid, so it makes the table look a little odd for that reason. So we just have that noted for you. Student success initiatives, also then on the last page, 63. Similarly, Johnson County Community College was not eligible for their state aid, but the amount that was approved has also been drastically reduced. So there's only $2.5 million for that program in 2027. And for all of these amounts, there are provisions attached to the funding amount that specify how the aid distribution must be made. So this isn't an action item for you. This is just for your information. So in that vein, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
David, this is Deb McCulka.
Go ahead, Deb.
And remind me, please, what the funding, the decrease for the student success initiatives, what were those used for? What were examples of how colleges used 200,000 versus then the 4,000 that they have for this year, 54 for this year?
Thank you for that question, Member McCulka. Don't know yet what the colleges will do to address those reductions, but typically what that funding will be used for would be things like an academic advisor to assist students understanding their pathway to a credential. Could be any number of software purchases if a college would find it advantageous to monitor students for things like their student success. Are they advancing through the coursework? Are they having difficulty with college algebra? All the usual alerts that a college might be trying to search for. I'd be happy also to turn it over to phone a friend and ask a college president if they have any insights as to how they've been using it at their campuses.
It's okay. Some, as Elaine mentioned, we have some alert systems, early alert systems, like a dropout detective, or those things that faculty members are able to put in. You know, if Greg has missed 2 classes, then it knows an advisor, or we have a retention specialist that will reach out to him. Or if there's just any sort of kind of struggling issue that you might see, you can put that information in there, and then we make sure that an advisor follows up. Other examples might be just improving our dual advising for the high schools and implementing those programs. And so that's just another example. Greg may have something different.
No, I would agree. Additionally, and I think Vice President Frisbee addressed this as well. Sometimes it's software purchases or things that will help your students improve. An example of that might be, I know our nursing group uses ATI, or there's Kaplan out there. Some of those are their test banks or question banks that allow the students to better prepare for the NCLEX RN or NCLEX PN exam. A variety of those kind of things are also utilized. There's no real particular, we're not reporting on the specifics of how that funding is used, but from the conversations across our sector, that's typically how they're used, either personnel to support students or things like software.
And I would just follow up that I think both Heather and Steve kind of try to collect that information from all of our institutions. That way, when we're in the legislative session, we can share examples with the legislators as well.
It's my understanding that's relatively a new funding stream. I know it wasn't around when I was working, so like FY24 is when it started.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So for the 2-year colleges, that funding was in place in 2025 at 17.5 million, then became 10.5 million and is now 2.5 million. The state universities, and for Washburn University, they receive funding at 24, 25, and 26. And for fiscal year 27, they have no state funding for that. So any additional staff that they've hired, I know that the universities in particular have hired a lot of advisors so that a student is getting a professional advisor as they go through their bachelor's degrees. Though the universities are going to have to figure out how they sustain that effort.
And this goes away after this year, right? This is
Yes.
the last year for this.
Yes. So I might also add on, the legislature has declared its intention that this is the last year of the funding. So it's unfortunate because we are seeing improved student retention rates and student graduation rates. And so this funding did seem to be having quite an effect.
This is Deb again. Yeah, this is, I find it interesting, and I enjoyed Blake's words about looking to the future and looking at performance, perhaps performance-based initiatives or understanding. And certainly, I think we get the institutions are expected to increase graduation rates, increase the employment rate, getting students in the field, getting them out into the work field. But we don't do a really good job, in my opinion, of measuring or at least reporting on the measurements and the successes that we have. And in order to improve performance-based initiatives and outcomes, you have to have measures that rely on student success activities that help students make it through sometimes tough times, sometimes difficult learning opportunities, whatever it is. There has to be some alignment between what is expected in the school arena and what we focus on if we're going to improve and to impact student performance measures, in my opinion. So there are things that go hand in hand with what we're expected to do, but if you don't have funding for them, so that's just my little rant on the idea that student success measures aren't successful. That's it.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I do want to put a plug in, following up on Member McCulka's comments. I want to put a plug in for our dashboard on our website, the Board of Regents website. We do have a strategic plan. We have the key stats portal that I think many folks are familiar with, but we also have a strategic plan dashboard that does highlight our some of the key things that the board is monitoring for our student success. And one of those is student retention and student graduation rates. So highlighting that, want to make sure that's known.
Any other comments? It's my understanding we don't need a motion.
No. Thank you.
Moving on, please walk us through the unified budget request for fiscal 28.
All right, thank you. So as we conclude the 2026 legislative session and already almost to launch into fiscal year 2027, which will begin on July 1, it's already time to start thinking about fiscal year 2028 for the budget purpose. So July 1, capital plans will be due from the state universities, every state agency that has capital planning. And then in September, agencies across state government will submit their fiscal year 2028 budget requests. And from the Board of Regents' point of view, they have statutory responsibility to present a unified appropriations request to the governor, to the legislature. The 2028 budget will be formulated, will be developed by the newly elected governor. So Laura Kelly has done her 8 years of budget, so it will be incumbent on the new elected person, whoever gets it in November. They will, one of the very first things they will launch into with their transition team is to craft their 2028 budget. So I do want to look back just for a brief time, for a moment, to bring up a slide. Thank you. We have a profile. I'm hoping that we can see the numbers on there. What I want to emphasize is two things. The consensus revenue estimating group met back in April and crafted a new revenue estimate for the state general fund. And as a result of that, they did reduce over fiscal year 26 and 27, they reduced the overall revenue picture by $54.7 million. So that was not an addition, it was a reduction. And much of the commentary surrounding their new estimate was the word uncertainty. With everything going on with international geopolitics, the cost of everything in the CPI for inflation, there's a lot of unknown built into those estimates. Nowhere is the CRE predicting or trying to predict a recession. They are only looking at the things that they know or that they have some sound reason for which to make an estimate. So they're not trying to speculate, in other words. So based on their newly formulated revenue estimates, Legislative Research Department then does some projections for the future. What could the legislature be looking at in future years in terms of spending and potential revenues? And the things I want to highlight, you'll see some red figures there, negative numbers. That is showing you where the legislature, the enacted budget, is spending more in that year than the state general fund is either took in or is predicted to take in as revenue. So the legislature, there's been a lot of discussion from Governor Kelly and from legislative leaders about the concern about spending more than they're taking in, and that is the case. Despite that, though, because we had such robust ending balances, 2.4 billion ending balance at the end of 23, but that's dropping, predicted to be 1.8 billion at the end of 2027. That is 17% of the ending balance. 17% is the ending balance predicted for next year. The statutory threshold is 7.5%, so more than double what they must have. So as of right now, the budget is looking quite healthy, you might say, even despite the spending beyond revenues in any one given year. However, there are always pressures. The Education Funding Task Force is meeting in the interim. They met yesterday, they're meeting this morning, talking about the K-12 funding formula. That is the bulk of state spending that you see there. Elementary, secondary education is a big piece of the state budget pie. There are other pressures, of course, all the health and human service caseloads that feed into spending, keeping people in their home rather than putting them in a nursing home or a state facility. all the things, prisons, they have responsibility for funding the state prison system. There are some challenges there. In addition to what we potentially would want, we as a collective system would want for higher education. So in that context, then, on page 64 is just the request to the TEA that you might want to come forth to the Board of Regents with some ideas for what the TEA would suggest the Board of Regents consider for the 2028 budget enhancements. One complication is we will not know until July what our state general fund allocation is from the division of the budget. And so there are times where we might think the technical college operating grant is a good example, the $7 million. It's been funded now for several years, but typically what's been happening is we get the allocation from the division of budget and that funding isn't there. So we have to ask for it back, which gets confusing for legislators because in their mind, they've been funding it. Why are you asking for it again? And we're asking for it again because that's just the rules of the budget game that we get caught up in sometimes some of the details. So that is why you see some of the items listed below on the bottom of page 64. Typically, the TEA does include a mention that the intention that there should be funding for the tiered and non-tiered using the three-year rolling average that we just talked about, and excel at CTE. We won't know until September what we will need for 2027's numbers. We'll be talking about that later in this meeting. So we will have to, what we have been doing traditionally for Excel and CTE for the subsequent year, because we pay for it 1 year in delay, we just make an estimate based on a few years of trending. So if the TEA wanted us to continue that, we could just leave that as a TBD until we know more in the fall, closer to when we have to submit. And then there are the other items that you see that you're very familiar with. They could be removed from our allocation. They may be retained in our allocation and we wouldn't need to ask for them back. So I flagged those for you with that footnote just so you're aware of that. There are a few other new ideas. I know Director Martinez has talked to you about expanding state support for adult education. We don't have funding for the GED Accelerator. That is one of those programs. It's been around. We used to have funding for it. We got all spent down. We just haven't been able to revive that. And nor have we ever had success with legislature for OER textbook support for our students. Purchasing of books is a challenge across our system. And so it could be an option that we do something to try and get a foothold in that to support students. It is a financial aid opportunity to support them. Developing OER could be one way of supporting our students. And then, of course, I wanted to mention the pilot of an outcomes-based funding model. The technical colleges talked about that with the legislature this session. Community colleges also mentioned it, so that could be another feature that the TEA would want to consider. So after all of that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for questions or take your feedback.
When's the budget due to the legislature?
It is traditionally submitted by us on October 1. By statute, it's October 1. But then, of course, we back up all those months till now because we've got to start the whole public process of garnering all the stakeholders' feedback.
And when does the board take a look at what we recommend?
At their budget workshop in the summer.
So I have a strange question for the Excel and CTE. Right now we have TBD. If I'm not mistaken, in House Bill 2513, I think that was the appropriation bill. Isn't there a line about 50 million being the cap?
Yes.
Shouldn't we just ask for that? Just give us 50 million. We can hold it for days when we're underfunded or overfunded, whatever it may be. Would that be a smart move to just say we want the 50 million you've stated will be appropriated to that line? That's a toss out there. Is that a reasonable request?
Yes, and Vice President White, that would mean the addition of roughly $13.5 million. So that in TBD would become about $13.5 million.
I guess we won't know, will our numbers justify 50 million? I mean, if we use the formulas and so forth, will it come up to 50 million? I mean, last year we spent 52 million, right? And this year they're getting 36. Now, I don't understand why they set a $50 million cap, but then they appropriate 36. That just seems a little strange to me. So is that leave it open for a supplemental request? You know, the way the climate is, I don't think a supplemental request has, maybe, I don't know what this chance of getting funded, so I don't know if starting out at 50. Other suggestions?
I mean, it seems reasonable to put the request in for what we need. Why would you put it in for less? So if there is if the actual number is, we'll just say 52. But if there is a cap in whichever bill, then it would make sense to me to put in the 50.
College presidents?
I would say, I don't know, if that October 1st date is too late, but I know we'll all be certifying data as well for the KSBSD. Now that's not certified till what is it, September 1st or something. That may be too late. So I don't know if there's any projections or, because a lot of us probably already know what our schools maybe should be receiving. So I don't know if that's something we could work to get together. So we have something that's more definitive versus the max. So that would just be, Greg, did you have thoughts on that?
So being over at the Capitol and sitting through some of the meetings, I don't think the legislature has much flavor for increasing the allocation. I think they acknowledged that we were significantly worried that 36 million was not going to be enough. And so they heard from a lot of sources that, it could be 36 million. And if that's all we get, that's going to be a struggle for a lot of colleges that, have already delivered. Again, we talked about it earlier. You've delivered the education the prior year and you're allocating an amount the subsequent year. So what happens to that amount of money? So it makes sense to talk about $50 million, but I don't know that they're going to receive that message differently than you are asking for way too much. I don't know how they'll receive it in a positive light. I like it because that means that we would have been paid for the delivery of the courses that we've already delivered across the sector. Historically, and this goes back all the way to 2013, I think, when the first group of Excel and CTE, they never have funded it in the budget. It's always had a supplemental afterwards. So traditionally, we've gone back and asked for it. The question is, if it's a few $1 million, it's probably easier to get, but 13 is pretty heavy. That's a heavy lift. I'd love to be able to tell you with a straight face, yeah, ask for that 50 million, but I really don't think they're going to, you see the numbers up there in the future, all in red. They think they're going to be worse than that. I promise. They think that's an underestimate. At least they've been acting that way in the legislative cycle this year. But it's also an election year, so they're not going to spend a lot of money. So I don't know. I'd love to be able to do the crystal ball and rub my head or whatever else and tell you that. I know Seth would love that. Crystal ball.
I'll rub your head.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I should also clarify, for the terms of this process, one advantage that we do have is that none of the actions taken today are etched in stone. So understanding that here we are, it's end of May, there are some months that are going to elapse and enrollment data will be submitted this summer and certified in September, and we will be meeting again in September to talk about how fiscal year 2026 turned out for Excel and CTE. So these numbers, whatever number gets attached, can easily be updated and revised.
That was my question, because there's 3 of them there that are to be determined. When are they determined? And so later it could be.
Yes.
This is
If I-
Deb. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tiffany.
No, that's okay. Just very briefly. And first of all, thank you, Vice President Frisbee. You always give such a detailed report. I guess just food for thought, and I may not be able to be at the end of the meeting. So just to to share my support for the statement that Vice President White shared with asking for enough to safeguard not losing more. I mean, basically. The cap in my mind makes sense, but if in some way that's offensive, I guess I worry about being being decreased further when it's already been a struggle. The other piece of that, this is a record year. I mean, we heard President Nugent and Dr. Nichols both sharing the record year in graduation rates. CTE scholars, completers, and concentrators. This is a record year for that. I know it was for Topeka and many around the region. And so I just think the results and the outcomes are there. The dashboard was referenced and, strongly coming out saying, we need to be fully supportive of our institutions is however we give that message. So I'd be in support of that, but whatever is decided in this space as a temporary number to revisit, I think we need to give a strong message so that we're not, decreasing what people have to work with, because it will not only be a challenge for them, but also will be a tumbling effect for the K-12 sector.
This is
Great.
Deb, and I agree with Cindy on that setting and what Tiffany just said on the setting the number in the cap. I don't remember when we were talking about getting ditching programs for funding. Where did the 36 come from? Other than I understand the legislature funded it. Did that come from a result of what TEA said? I'm trying to figure out how we got to 36. Did we have any influence or saying that that's what the number was when we know it takes more?
I can't add anything, I'm afraid, Mr. Chairman, to that, how they arrived at the $36 million figure. If that was just a hunch that was what the legislature felt comfortable funding for the 27 budget, I don't know.
But I think the question is, what did we submit? I assume we submitted something. I recall vaguely doing this, but I can't remember. What did we actually put into the TBD for 27?
Thank you for that clarification. The board office budget asked for 52 or 54 million. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. I can go look it up, but it was in excess of 50.
Okay, so
yes,
so there is history there of asking for what we need.
Mm-hmm.
I would hate to turn in something less than what we need based on what we're given when there's been a kind of a history of supplemental coming through, and we can't count on the supplemental. So I think you got to go in with the number that we need, and I would go in with what it actually is. But since there is an actual cap in the bill, then I would put the cap in. If we can show that it should be more than that, which I think we can.
And I guess, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
We are also federally funded, so not state funded, but the thing is, it's that catch-22. So if you put the cap at 50, because that's what the bill says, then you'll never get more. If you put less, then if you put the 36, then they'll be like, well, why do you need more? You operated this. I would say, ask for what you need. And that way it's a constant reminder that you're underfunding.
Oh, so even though there's a cap, just ask for what?
Yeah, I mean, the cap.
I like that.
The cap is the bill, not the need, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's.
Great.
Okay.
I like that idea. And because we're making progress on getting people out into the workforce and technical education. What we're doing is working, just from what I see in my small area. And so the records and the data is starting to show that. So we need to be data-based, and we need to be showing we're proving that we make a difference. You want to have data centers, or you want to have whatever the heck you want for industry, you got to have the people to do it. And the people doing it start in high school and in college training programs for a large majority of our programs that are coming into for businesses right now. And we're starting to really deliver on that. And they need to know that needs to be funded if they want to continue workforce growth and opportunity in Kansas. So I say, put what we need.
And
President Nichols.
as it keeps changing over there too, like a lot of them don't have the history. And so then they see a history and say, you know, well, you only asked for this last year, so why are you asking for this? If you ever want to increase it, kind of, that's what you need.
Great.
Okay, so you asked a question earlier about the TBDs and do we have those figures? So for tiered and non-tiered, remember we're on the 3-year rolling average. So you actually have the enrollments for that, but what you don't have is the dollar amounts that are tied to the specific enrollments finalized. Is that fair to say? Okay, so that number is probably, there's at least a ballpark figure, but I don't blame you guys for putting TBD because you don't know the specific dollar amount for each component of the cost model. But you're going to be pretty close, and you'll get those numbers, like you said, Elaine, probably close to September. So it's TBD today, but it's not completely out of the realm of knowing. The other part is the Excel and CTE. You probably are going to have the enrollment figures pretty soon. Are we a trail in the summer or a lead? I don't remember that.
Summer's a lead.
Summer's a lead.
We will have that information September, early September.
Okay, so you're still in the situation of you'll know the enrollment, but it's whether the specific dollar amounts that go with each enrollment type. So those two are actually, I mean, they'll have that data once they're able to get through the work that needs to be done. So it's not as free flowing as we don't really know. They're not 100% confident in giving you a hard figure. So I don't blame them for putting TBD, but I wanted to make sure we kind of understand that on our side of why that might be a little bit hard. The figure that came out of where we're getting the 36, 37, those were projections, to be honest, based on what we think would happen to the model. And then in the legislative sessions, you know, we talked about the what ifs and the possibilities, which things that might happen in the Board of Regents side in terms of what's funded in what category. That's where the projections have to come. That's the conversation that went over in the Capitol. So
Yeah, I think the 36 million, maybe, you know, we had the community colleges and tech colleges work on if there's no freshmen and sophomores and that kind of thing.
sure.
And a possible reduction, how much that is. I think maybe that's part of where that 36 million came from. But I think I agree with Greg. I'd like to leave it TBD right now because I think later this summer you'll have some numbers that could be tied to make your requests more solid. I'm not saying leave it TBD to make the request, but I'm saying wait now for later.
Yeah. And I think we share this for certain. We request that it's fully funded, tiered and non-tiered, fully funded, capital outlay, fully funded, tech college operating grant. That's the things that we're really saying. What those hard figures are, we kind of have to rely on the timing of those. The business partner and apprenticeship money that is allocated here, we certainly support the 14.3 million, but I think we also have a similar idea of how that could be apportioned, and are working on models for that. But we still think 14.3 is something that we ask you support.
So I want a clarification if I could. I mean, we've thrown a lot of numbers. We've thrown out 36, we've thrown out 52. We went through a structured discussion on what we could remove over this past year. So I'm assuming that maybe it's a bad assumption that basically what we agreed on, because we knew this was going to be an issue, funding in the future was going to be an issue. And so we went through and we scrubbed the program and we said, we're going to remove these programs, or we're going to not do freshman and sophomore. What we agreed on a set of plans for the future. And this is, we're talking about fiscal year 28, which is going to be what we give in 27. So I am assuming that that's going to be applied to the estimated value we're going to be asking for. And that is the number we're talking about. Whether that's 35 million or 52 million or something in between, that's the number that we're gonna ask for. Whenever we have the data to get to that number. Is that?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. So presumably whatever policy has been adopted by the TEA, the Board of Regents, and the legislature, depending on legislative proviso for that fiscal year or what has been adopted by the system on our side, then that will be applied to the calculations.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And that'll be, and I guess in my mind, and maybe I'm just not, it feels like that number is going to be significantly more than 35, 36 million, which is what we're getting for, I'm going to say this year, whatever year we're in. But then there's also a supplemental that has been approved already
For last year.
For the previous year.
for the previous year.
So this request, if I could try to clarify, we're gonna get the 36. The TBD here would be, once we have the data in September, we would ask for the additional. That would replace that TBD to make this current year whole, or as whole as we can get.
Yes. So what I'm interpreting this discussion to be, leave it as TBD for now and follow the tradition we've been following, which is when we know something, we know we have the instructional cost model rates right now for the Excel and CTE amount because we're 1 year behind. So it's just a matter of getting the enrollment figures from the schools, and then we can do those calculations for the programs that are eligible. If they're Promise Act eligible, then that counts. If it's a freshman in high school, then it doesn't count. Retakes, no, and so on. So we would apply those calculations, and then we would have a figure then to estimate for the coming year.
I apologize. I'm getting mixed up on fiscal years again. So the supplemental for the year ending June of 26, what we're just getting ready to finish up, that supplemental has not been approved. We only know that it's
Correct.
36 million or
Correct.
whatever that exact figure was. But there's no supplemental that's currently been approved to make that whole.
Correct.
Okay, and that's what this is.
Yes.
I think I'm hearing something different.
Well, I got confused.
You're saying FY 26, right?
Well, so I'm getting
Currently this year.
Academic year
ending-
26,
Okay.
fiscal year 27.
I think I got confused because this says fiscal year 28.
Yes.
And I feel like we're mixing fiscal year 27 and fiscal year 28.
Yeah.
And it's confusing me.
Yeah, this is the request for fiscal year 28. We know we have 36 million. Whether we go back and ask for a supplemental for this year, that's different than this. This is the request for 2028.
Okay, then I'm back to my original position, which is we asked for 50 plus million or whatever we need. I'm getting,
Complicated.
well, I understand that. I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing because we're not asking for this specific conversation is about the supplemental. It's about fiscal year 28.
Correct.
Which is not anything we've started teaching yet. It's gonna start July 1st.
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting shaking heads. I feel like I've accomplished something. I know where we're at.
And what I'm saying is, we don't have to do the TBDs today because we may have information to back better numbers later on this summer. And it may be, and probably will be, more than 36 million. But I'd rather have some data to back that up than just going in and say, well, you capped it at 50 million, so we won 50 million. I don't think that works.
As long as that's soon enough for whatever they're doing this summer. So I'm concerned if they're gonna be talking about the fiscal year 28 budget this summer, I would like to have a number in front of them that's more than 35, 36 million dollars for them to think about. That would be my only concern about waiting till September.
And that will be a very similar discussion as taking place today to clarify the timing, because some of the funding is paid in 2 years in arrears and this is funded 1 year in arrear. And so how it all happens and comes together will have to be made clear for the regions as well. But we have, to be clear, we've had TBD before for these two items, simply because we just don't know. Because of the effect of the 3-year rolling average for tiered and non-tiered, it does have a bit of a smoothing effect. So even as some colleges are growing quite quickly, their state aid is not growing at that same pace. It's slowed down because of the effect of that 3-year average. So all that to say, having a TBD is not problematic. It's more the substance of what is the premise behind the request, and what does the TEA and the Board of Regents, what do they want to really focus on with the legislature and the governor?
Well, something I would add there is that the problem to me is that most of us, I would see most of us don't budget out in advance in anticipation of a supplemental to bail us out. And that we'll have some sort of great bonus problem that takes care of us. And our schools are operating on a pretty tight budget right now. And so we're going to be talking, or we have been talking. Sometimes I'm getting mixed up with all this too, Cindy. But we're talking about schools, and they've already delivered programs. And if those supplementals aren't approved, or they aren't approved for the right amount, those schools eat that. And so we are talking about how we build budgets, and I understand it's the state, and I understand it's government, and it probably never works. But what what I feel we're doing here is we almost set up our schools and their budgets for some failure, and some of them could be catastrophic if things aren't good. Or they could make a huge difference on whether some schools can stay open even or not, depending on how much they put into programs or where they can take it out of, and how it affects all the teaching and the outcomes. So somewhere, someday, I think we need to do a better job for our schools to understand what money they have, and that they're not always coming in hand with their pocketbook out saying, oh, you didn't give us enough. It was because you didn't fund us up front enough. It's not. So this arrears thing, to me, is almost a bigger question that we can't fix, but that makes a huge difference for school, our university, our colleges, our technical, for their budgeting. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Deb. That was very well said. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, you cannot, we have to do a better job, I think, of communicating what's going to happen if it isn't funded based on our new scrub of the system. You know, at some point, the colleges are going to have to cut up front.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't know what they're getting, or they know it's going to be significantly less, there's going to be no ability to provide some of those classes. And I don't know that we've really communicated that piece, right? That because of the way it's funded and with this whole supplemental back end thing, that if that becomes the model, you know, going forward, then you have other ramifications. And so that, to me, I think just if we're going to do it like a TBD, I think we just have to be clear in that communication.
I'll go back to Greg's comment. You're going to ask to be fully funded. And I think we need the TBD now, get the data later this summer. So I assume we would request more than 36 million, but we would have the numbers to back that up at this time. So any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept this as it is. And maybe you want to add on to the motion that later on the TBDs may be changed due to data that we have that will make the request more sound and more or better.
I do have one question, and I know you guys are working on the model, the being paid for completions, all of that kind of stuff. Is that coming out of the business apprenticeship? So it will not be a TBD. It is actually a subline of the 14.3.
I think we both, I mean, independently, they've worked on it, we worked on it. We both have that mindset that
Okay.
it would be.
So I don't know how we
Wouldn't be
mark that, Elaine, but basically that would just be, it's not additional amount. It's just part of.
It would
that
become more of a explanation in our budget narrative and not really a separate item
Okay.
anymore. Yes. And I Absent discussion of the other items, I'm guessing perhaps that there is not great enthusiasm for expanding some things like the OER or the adult education, Mr. Chairman. Am I getting that clear? So the things that have been funded in the budget, focusing on the tiered and non-tiered and Excel and CTE is the most important, but continuing our CTE capital outlay, the business partnerships, the technical college operating grants. Okay, that's what we will run with for now.
Okay.
All right,
Do we need a motion to that?
we do.
Someone needs to make a motion.
Well, I'll move it. I'm a little worried about articulating it correctly. Can I say I move what's just been said and?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
We'll let the note takers. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any opposed?
I actually do. I oppose. I think we should put either 50 million or an actual estimate into the Excel and CT state aid number. I feel like if we wait, it's too long. I think the conversations will already been going for 6 months. And I think we need to set a precedent going forward that we need the full amount at the beginning. So I would like to put that in there. We can arrange, we could put, you know, if you don't want it to be 50, put 48, 9. I don't, you know, I just feel like it needs to be something in there. I don't like the TBD. I feel like it leaves too much floating for people to fill in a number for too long on conversations that are already happening.
Any other
This-
opposed?
This is Deb, and I would agree, I oppose. I'll agree with Cindy, and it's because I think we need some kind of indication. And maybe we've been doing this way for a long time. If we're working on beliefs and supplementals, and we think that we're gonna be getting supplementals all the time, I'm not sure how feasible that is and how sustainable that
opposed?
should be.
I might have a clarifying question, Elaine. Like, when would you have the tiered and non-tiered rolling average information? And when would you have the Excel and CT information to make better projections with?
Thank you for that question. For the second, I'll answer the second one part first. The Excel and CTE, we would be able to formulate some pretty reasonable expectations in September. The figures, though, for tiered and non-tiered state aid, that's going to take a while. So typically, those figures are something we come to you in January with. We have had some success in getting it more in the December, November timeframe. And so what we've done in that case is submitted it to the governor in our budget appeal. So we have an opportunity, the TEA submits a letter, the Board of Regents submit letter, the institutions all submit letters to the governor promoting what at that point in time, so think of November, so 6 months from now, we will know then what those numbers are. And that's how we've handled that.
Well, we have a motion on the floor. I have 2 opposed. Any other opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Frisbee. Next up, Director Sharman Chambers to review the discussion of the technical program, which is designated responsibility of TEA.
Good morning. Thank you. The next issue before the authority is to determine the next steps in the review of existing technical programs. So starting on page 71 of your packet, you have a variety of background concerning this. You have information about the TEA's delegated authority from the Board of Regents, the statutory requirements for technical programs from KSA 71-1802, and information on how we have previously conducted some of those reviews. And I have more data on that, but what we want to focus on today is for the current review cycle covering AY 22 through AY 24, we're making 2 recommendations for the TEA to review and approve or amend. And that is to start by reviewing the 34 programs that reported 10 or fewer graduates total exiting post-secondary education and becoming employed for a total of 3 years. That's not an average. It's 10 students in the program for 3 years. And that's regardless of how many institutions are offering the program. Some programs are one institution, some are multiple. The second recommendation is for the TEA to consider some additional accountability metrics for further program review. So that first action that's recommended is to retain eligibility for technical funding. We're recommending that institutions offering the programs within those 34 identified ZIP codes submit a written update no later than September 30th to the TEA. And we would then aggregate that and bring that to the TEA in October. That required update to include at least 3 elements. Number one, results of the institution's most recent program review for the program, because technical and community colleges perform their own program reviews on their own cycles. We would also look for the Kansas labor market demand, job postings, post-secondary concentrator data as reported for the program in the most recent Perkins CLNA, because again, all technical and community colleges participate in the Perkins CLNA. So we would have that data as well. And then thirdly, an institutional plan for the future of the program. And we've suggested 3 different approaches because they are currently used in the university sector. But again, other approaches might be something that the TEA wants to consider. But at least to consider one of the 3 approaches to begin implementation during academic year 2027. And that would either be to discontinue the program and phase it out, perhaps merge it with another similar program. And we would caveat that we need to be preparing students for the same occupation when we do that. So we would not see, we'll do a far-fetched one, we would not see ag and nursing merged. And the third option would be to retain the program under a structured improvement and monitoring process for no longer than 2 years. Again, we would consolidate that information, bring it to the authority in October. And I would pause there to see if there are questions or if you would like to approve, amend, not approve.
Carmen, would it be possible to get disaggregated data, like you have the number of institutions that have the programs, but not specifically which ones those are? And I can go through and look at our ZIP codes, and I've done that. But how will that be communicated out to those colleges?
We have that in the KTIP portal, but we can certainly help folks navigate through that and look at your own individual data. Absolutely. Oh,
I think the guidance would just be appreciated, so thank you for that.
absolutely.
Any other questions?
So you're just wanting to, well, basically for these 34 zip codes, you just want, if any of them have less than 10 graduating students, then you're saying the program would be removed as a technical program?
I'm saying that for these 34 programs specifically, they have reported for 3 years, 10 or less students.
For 3 years, okay.
And that may not warrant discontinuing the program, perhaps. But when we went through this process before, a number of years ago, pre-pandemic, we had a lot of discussion, but we didn't get a lot of feedback directly from the institutions. The other piece of that was that VP White at the time did a lot of that one-on-one work with the institutions. And based on a variety of things, I'd kind of like to pull staff out of the middle of that a little bit and get the feedback directly from the institutions to the TEA. So the theory would be that for those 34 programs, if I am Cloud County Community College and I offer that first program on the list, I would be submitting information to the TEA to say, here's our plan. And it might be to discontinue, it might be to merge it, and it might be, we have an action plan because of XYZ, and here's what we're going to do to improve those student outcomes.
And what are you asking of us? Do we need to vote on that? What you just said?
Do you like that proposal?
I actually like that proposal better than just saying we're done.
Right.
To give
Right.
the colleges all an opportunity to come back and say, no, we agree. We're done. Or here's a plan for improvement or whatever.
Yep.
And I would prefer to vote on that. That would be my motion.
And that's what this would do. So this would actually default back to the institutional's program review process. And really, then that college would come forward and say, here's what they found, here's what they plan to do to improve that. And then we would monitor that.
Okay.
Yep.
I like that.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Deb.
Second by Deb. Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Excellent. So the second consideration actually speaks to some of that. Member Hoover.
Sorry, may I ask one question?
Sure.
Just a clarifying question on the previous motion. I just, as we do that with 34 programs, and if I know there's one that may have 8 institutions, how will that come back then? Will it come all in 1 month to the TEA for all 34 so I was just kind of curious as to, we have to have that submitted by September, but what the actual review process would look like?
Well, that's actually part of my second recommendation, to think about operationalizing the entire process, because that will be a lot to look at in October, definitely. But we're already starting academic year 27. The most recent data that we have here is as of 24, and we will be getting KTIP for academic year 25 here this summer. So we're already kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit, and we want to make sure that we're getting started on it. So yes, so if I may, the plan or the suggestion, if you will, is to consider some additional accountability metrics, pardon me, to review programs that are receiving state aid. So at the bottom of page 73 in your packet, there are several models that already are being utilized here in the board. And one is, we outlined for you here that in that first column, I made some notes about the metrics that we used to categorize this review. We're not doing the review, the TEA is doing the review, but we tried to categorize the programs by looking at the graduates exiting and employed, the wages, and then the percentage of graduates exiting and employed. We also provided you the information there for the university program review, their approved minima for their baccalaureate degrees. We do not have to do what the universities do. The universities don't have to do what we do, but it is a good idea to always have a sense of sort of how we overlap and how we match up. And then we also, some of you will recall, outcome metrics from long ago and far away. But I put those on here because we haven't talked about them in a while. They are specifically geared to be outcome metrics for technical programs. And those measures and those targets were set back in 2012. We all got busy with some other things. And so there might be some things that we've already got that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, that maybe we want to start applying. So I have a lot of thoughts about different metrics and different things that we would look at, but I would make a recommendation for a goal for the TEA for 26-27, and that is to operationalize the performance review of existing programs, including timelines, initial review criteria, reporting, and accountability considerations, such as minimum performance benchmarks, to strengthen accountability for state-supported technical programs. And that is my recommendation, which, if the authority would prefer, you can consider when you're looking at goals later today.
And just for clarity, then, as these reviews are happening, it wouldn't apply to this coming year. It would apply to the following year.
It would depend on how quickly we can move, but what we need to do is we need to make some strides looking at the data from the 3 years that we have. And then this is the second time that we've attempted this because we were right up against the pandemic the last time we did this. So we don't have a standardized, we're going to review every X number of years. We're going to review this many programs. We're going to get that data on this date, and we're going to get the information from the colleges here. I would like to operationalize that whole process so that we, in addition to additional accountability metrics beyond just 10 graduates exiting and employed over 3 years. I think that's kind of low.
So I'm good with all of that. I just don't know how we would apply any. I have a hard time when classes are starting July 1st to apply that to the coming year when we're not going to get data from the colleges back until September or October.
Right.
So I don't know that we need to acknowledge that, or we just say we have a goal for doing that this year and it to apply to the following, or how we want to say that. But
maybe a clarification would be useful in that all of our data is always going to be in arrears. We're always going to be reporting after the fact. So
right.
The recommendation of starting to take action on programs, those 34 programs, starting to take action by the institutions during this current year is different than it'll probably take us some time working with the Program and Curriculum Committee and the TEA to say, here's how we want to operationalize that overall process and all of the parameters that are part of it.
Okay, so it's basically, there's not going to be an action until we do that. We have to put the operational stuff in place and okay, yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
This has an appeal to it, but there's kind of a baseline question that I'm a little foggy on. Why is it better for the TEA to be doing this type of analysis than to just be trusting that the institutions are similarly motivated to turn out graduates that are well paid, et cetera? Why aren't there decisions on the ground kind of
There are.
For that?
There are.
Okay.
There are, absolutely. This is in response to additional pressure, of course, from the legislature and what have you, but in making sure that the TEA is also then, there's no process right now by which the community and technical colleges bring that review data forward to the TEA. Nor do they necessarily need to specifically do so every single time. But for programs that are not meeting a minimum performance metric that we identified in 2018, that's what our recommended starting point is. And at the end of the day, it is all about making sure that we're accountable for the stewardship of that state funding.
President Noja?
Sherman's exactly right. We are doing it at our own institutions. This would probably, I just describe it as being another layer of checks and balances, perhaps. But one thing that I think would be needing to be clarified, which may be what Member Hoover was asking, if these updates that we've got to submit by September 30th, 2026, but the goal is to develop that matrix or that metric. If that's not done by then, is this just Because if it's a goal, it may not be done by September
Nope.
30th. So I think
I
that's the
would-
clarification we.
Yeah, I would anticipate that it would definitely take this next year to formalize all of those particular metrics. So right now, what you would be referencing and reporting on really is those 34 programs that had 10 or less. Some of these metrics that we've used in the past might provide some additional rationale for, we would like to recommend putting this on an action plan and not discontinuing our program because our students are earning X amount above the state average and what have you.
Okay, the recommendation you have, we can do that in a goal discussion, correct?
You certainly could if you would like.
Any other questions before we move on?
On the graduates exiting post-secondary that report 95% earnings, is that self-reported by the student?
That particular outcome metric is actually reported via KTIP, and KTIP takes the K-Board data and the Department of Labor data and matches up by Social Security number. So that wage information is based on the unemployment insurance records and reports. And it's supplemented then for a student that is not reported, the Social Security number doesn't match in that it can be supplemented and self-reported and utilized based on the follow-up report that the institution provides. You'll find that like in farming or sometimes students who've moved out of state or what have you.
You check those more than one quarter? Just because since it's quarterly data and someone got a job in the third quarter, then their wage might look low.
This is old. This is an old metric that we had created at the time. KTIP looks at second quarter after exit. I believe that to be consistent mostly also with WIOA and so on and so forth. But we have, and Perkins too, but we have also had conversations because we do have that cohort data going back of it would be great to know by program how students are doing 5 years out, how students are doing 10 years out. And in the 2-year sector, a very large percentage of those folks stay in Kansas. So we would be able to, match up your Social Security number from 2018 to 2028 wage data and hopefully see that. So that's one of the many thoughts that I have of things that I would like to see us do in the future.
Okay, let's move on.
David?
And Sharman, I think you. go
David,
ahead.
this is Deb.
Okay.
So I think that's a good, sounds like a good plan, Sharman. I think that review process is positive. What I would want to make sure of is that the process that of course the institutions and you're planning that there are involved. I don't think that we should be, that if a program if we're looking at discontinuing, the institutions have time to plan and to make the determination whether they want to continue to fund the program within their own resources and not receive aid if that's what occurs, or that they are not penalized if they have students and we want to plan forward rather than have the schools pay after the fact. So whatever we do it so it doesn't penalize the institutions for offering programs that we then change the rules on.
Absolutely.
Yep, thank you. Let's move on. Sharman.
Yes. So the next.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to make the clarification of the consideration. Although a lot of our students do stay, there are some institutions that are along the border that we don't have those reciprocal agreements with that may be employed in Oklahoma or Nebraska that we wouldn't see in that data.
So I would,
Colorado, excuse me.
I would just follow up on that. The follow-up data does allow for self-reported wages. It's not perfect, but we're working on it.
Validated.
Okay, let's try again. We'll move on. Sharman, you're going to lead us in a discussion on the proration of the Excel, CTE, and AOK funding for fiscal year 27.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next issue paper begins on page 74 of the packet, and it concerns recommendations regarding the proration methodology for Excel and CTE and AOK. I would mention that we are presenting this today for informational purposes. However, that fiscal year 27 proration methodology, which the TEA would be reviewing in September after we get our academic year 26 data finalized, it will need to be presented to the authority as an action item in August at least, unless the authority chooses to make that determination today. So as we've been discussing, the fiscal year 27 appropriation for Excel and CTE is $36 million. This appropriation supports the enrollments that have already been provided from academic year 2026, the coursework that's already been delivered by our institutions. The information won't be available until September, and you will also recall that academic year 25 is the last data year that we have available. Those calculated costs totaled $52.6 million, and our current trend data indicates that the anticipated costs are north of that amount, obviously. So the community college and technical college leadership were asked to provide recommendations for proration methodology. So you also have that in your packet. On page 75, you have the email from the community colleges. And on page 78, you have the recommendation letter submitted by the technical colleges. So we've prepared two scenarios as examples to illustrate how various methodologies might be implemented. And I would also first caveat what we were not able to do within this. So the indicators from the legislation for metrics that will be applicable to the data that has the coursework that's already been delivered that we could not include in these estimates is a rate to account for retakes due to failure. The best information that we actually had was academic year 2024 fail rate by institution for all courses, not by Excel and CTE. We didn't feel like it was fair to make an assumption that all fails are retaken and funded. And attempting to determine a percentage of that, we didn't have a good way to do that. We also could not account for student non-eligibility due to having a GPA below 2.0, or for students that haven't earned at least half the credits towards graduation. So that's what we could not include in these examples. So on page 77, you have a scenario that is similar to the recommendation from the community colleges. So the very first thing that you will see on that page is in the brown columns. This is our academic year 2025 actual data, 52 point almost $6 million. Actual calculated costs based on actual enrollments. So the first thing that we did is we took the information that we had for academic year 2024 to try to approximate what we were looking at as far as students that were 9th and 10th graders that would not be eligible because they're not juniors and seniors. Our rate for the system was 18.39%. So that's the very first step here in the green, is to shave off the top, if you will, that 18.39% to account for freshmen and sophomores. And that shaves off just about $10 million. Again, it's an estimate. And then it's also important to note that we do not have the information for 9th and 10th graders for each institution. So we started there, and the difference between the 36 million and the 42.9 million that we get after we pull those off is 6.9 million that we need to figure out, that's over the 36 that we have to figure out how to prorate. So The pink area is making some assumptions about the Promise Act and about Promise Act eligibility. So what I did is I looked at Excel and CTE coursework by buckets. You hear us talking about the buckets all the time. But those buckets that are associated to programs which are not Promise eligible. So culinary, cosmetology, accounting, marketing, things like that. And I pulled those and added those up. So in that very first column, we're going to use Allen. We're going to pick on Allen Community College. So their total of the non-promise eligibility was a little over $58,000. And I did that for each institution and I added that up and that came to 4.6 million roughly. So Allen's percentage, that 58,000 is about 1.25% of the 44.6 million of the total. So applying that then to prorate down to the 36 million, Allen Community College, 1.25% of the 6.9 million that were over the 36 came out to 86,221. So this methodology is essentially prorating that $6.9 million overage in a manner that's proportionate to the institution's share of non-promise calculated costs. And second, then on page 80 of the packet, you'll see the scenario that is similar to the technical college recommendation, which again, we start out with that same base information of academic year 2025. We pull off the 18.39% for freshmen and sophomores. And then this one is an across the board prorate based on the institution's share of the total to get us down to the 36 million. And that is the estimates.
So do you have one, I didn't see it in here. Do you have one that's just a straight equal pain, equal hurt percentage? The way we've been doing it?
That's the second one.
That is the second one.
That is the second one on page 80. Yep.
But that still assumes ninth, and you did that after you took the 9th and 10th grade.
That's right. Because
The reason I asked that is because, yes, we have agreed to do that going forward. I think we agreed on that. But I mean, this not retroactively.
the legislation requires that the distributions for fiscal year 27 be made based on those assumptions.
Okay.
And that affects the coursework that was already delivered in AY 26.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. I missed that.
I suspect that there may have been some similar confusion talking about fiscal years, what affects what.
I'm no doubt.
I'm hopeful that the legislature had anticipated making their changes forward looking as well, but because those distributions start happening immediately after the fiscal year, we're making those and we're making changes to things that have already been delivered. Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha.
Greg and Amber, would you comment on your proposals?
So our proposal was with respect to the 9th and 10th graders that they move those enrollments into tiered and non-tiered. They're currently in Excel and CTE bucket, but not to completely not fund them at all, but those move into tiered and non-tiered allocations. The other part of it, the legislature also had some GPA requirements and some, you had to be on track for graduation. So those are going to be a little bit harder to calculate now. So there might be some adjustments there, of course. But yeah, our proposal was an equal distribution of the pain, as you so eloquently said. We understand that does leave some that are hurting a little more than others.
And that is scenario one that you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes,
Answer
on
for him.
page 80.
Yeah,
Oh, on page 80. Yeah.
it's the second one, but it's scenario one.
President noted.
I would agree with President Nichols. I mean, really the only difference in ours is just the preservation of the programs that are deemed, most important or high demand. And so that's the one additional caveat to that option or scenario. But we would also say that if there were some that were excluded from that because they're not Promise Act programs, that they would also hit the tiered or business marketing non-tiered model. So it wouldn't be as Member McCulka mentioned earlier, we wouldn't just be eating it. It would at least move over to the tiered and non-tiered model.
And that would remain consistent. That's the structure now. That your high school students, if they're not funded through Excel and CTE, then they are moved over to non-tiered funding at this point.
Oh.
And to the other part of that with the GPA and the half through, we've worked on certification forums as institutions. So when we've met with our superintendents and counselors, I know President Carter and a lot of the community colleges shared a similar form where we're having them all certify those things for auditing purposes. And so although it may not be seen on the KBOR side of it, we are still certifying and making sure that those requirements are met.
So basically you're adding on the non-promise programs and the legislature punted on that, right?
Right. It's not included in the proviso, in the legislation. It was a TEA and board approved process to start academic year 27, which starts right now because it's summer, fall, spring. So the promise.
Help me remember, because again, we've talked about so much, but I thought we purposefully disconnected Promise and Excel and CTE funding when we looked at like the programs we were going to remove from the funding model, right? We've kind of gone through and looked at those. I thought we had purposely removed connecting Promise and together with that. We agreed on the 9th and 10th graders. We agreed on if they're not passing their classes, which I don't know how we get there was some confusion about how we would get the data, whatever. But I thought we had not approved or had not like been in agreement on the Promise piece.
Actually, the Promise piece is part of the TEA and KBOR recommendation specifically. What we didn't feel like we could recommend, I believe legislatively, we did not have the authority to recommend limiting Excel and CTE to 9th and 10th graders. It was discussed, but at the end of the day, that was not part of the TEA and KBOR recommendation. Which made it into the legislation instead.
No, I get that. I don't remember us agreeing on.
So the non-promise programs are cosmetology, culinary, accounting. They are those. They're essentially the same.
And there are more.
Or though.
Yes, there are.
That
Those
weren't
are
not approved to remove.
That were approved to remove. There are definitely more that are approved to continue that are part of the Promise Act eligibility.
Right.
There's a significant number that are more that are Promise eligible, but there are 20 or 30 some programs that do not fall within those Promise eligible categories. That was in January that we decided, that the TEA decided that those that are eligible would be also eligible for Excel and CTE, and those that were not Promise eligible, we would begin applying that same parameter to Excel and CTE, but looking forward, absolutely, and not starting that until academic year 27.
So they agreed to, we agreed to a teach out. So a teach out period. So anyone enrolled in cosmetology at Washburn Tech this year we just ended are allowed to be in it next year. So August when we start school back up, but that's it. No brand new students can be in it. Anything like that. Those are being phased out.
I totally get that. And I remember talking cosmetology. I remember talking like a handful of programs.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't remember is that we did a sweeping discussion of everything that wasn't, or that wasn't promise eligible. I didn't remember doing a sweeping thing with promise. We were doing it program by program.
We can grab that for you.
So that was
With-
my only thing is I want to make sure we are in agreement on what we're what we're doing going forward, and we're not just making a sweeping assessment of this. And quite frankly, personally, I feel like we shouldn't apply any of that to, unless it's in the legislature and we have to, we shouldn't do that this year because it's already been taught. And when I say this year,
You mean this previous year?
this previous
Yes.
year that we're approving funding.
Sure.
Yes.
Yep.
And then we would apply that starting in fiscal year.
So your recommendation would be the one on page 80 where it is the pain is shared equally and we are not prorating based on
I
the
think
Promise
so.
Act.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree with that. It's the going back that's problematic there. There's a deeper discussion, it sounds like, to be had that would be proactive, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we boil down to where we need to be on the question. With freshmen and sophomores, were the institutions compliant when the students were enrolled?
I don't know that we know that for sure.
Were they not included in the funding for their engagement or involvement?
They were, so in essence, what the legislature did is they made the requirement for Excel and CTE to only apply to juniors and seniors effective last summer. And the institutions individually would not necessarily have been capturing the GPA data, the on track to graduation necessarily. It varies by institution. So the timing issue, that's essentially what the legislation does, is it makes those requirements effective as of last summer, long before anyone was managing their program to those parameters.
Okay. I just want to make sure that the institutions are not being penalized. They've already delivered the service. They deserve the money. I mean, to me, it gets as simple as that. And for us as a TEA, I think we'd be delinquent to take any other position. The institutions did what they were asked to do. The students were enrolled. The services were delivered. And now we're saying, well, we changed, the rules have changed. So just be understanding. I go, no way. That's a horrible business model. You know, it made me think about a situation I had some years ago with a customer, very good customer. He'd been with us for some time. And he called me after the fact and said, Ray, this bill's too high. I said, really? What's wrong? Well, Johnny just didn't get it done fast enough. I said, did he get it done right? Did he solve the problem you have? Yes. Well, I asked him, or he asked me, he said, so what would happen if I didn't pay it? And I didn't remember I said this, but he told me later. He said, but you're not that kind of person, is what I said. And I would hope we as the TEA are not that kind of person, that we make promises not only to the institutions, but to the students. And now we say, never mind. I'm not going to be one of those, I can tell you. So I would hope that we as a TEA honor our obligation that we've made or that it's been made to the institutions and say, provided the service, we're going to pay you for it. Those are my thoughts.
And Ray, is that scenario number one?
We don't have that scenario, Deb. Because, and so the question I have, because I completely agree with you, 100%. Can we go back and have a conversation with the legislator body and say, you know, the timing of this is not as recommended or whatever. And here's what we would recommend for this past year that's already been taught. And then, you know, the rest would be, as we move into the future, we can make all those recommendations that we've agreed to, but for not classes that have already been taught. For things that have already been taught, when this wasn't even discussed until after the school year had already started for last year, then it would be like we always do, which is the equal pay. Assuming, of course, and hopefully we'll get some supplemental funds, hopefully, somewhere. If not, we're kind of already doing that, Ray, because I mean, they've taught all these programs in the hopes that they were going to get fully funded and they didn't. But at the very least, you know, we shouldn't apply new rules that we agreed to for something that's already happened. But I don't know if we can do that from a something that's already been.
Gets a little tricky.
I guess that's the, maybe.
There you go.
I guess that's the question I have, right? Because we're having this discussion and this is an outcome of what we've just discussed right prior to this, of this process, which I tend to agree on the TBD piece because maybe we could better manage that. The question is it an option for us to just go back and essentially say this is unacceptable and they need to be fully funded? Or do we have to pick from options one and scenario 1 and 2 or?
So it's complicated. And the simple answer is, yeah, you have to make a call. So what happened in the law, and we have to follow the law, is retroactively, anyone who enrolled in summer of 25, fall of 25, spring of 26, if they were a freshman or sophomore, they don't count, even though the service was provided. That's the law.
In Excel.
In Excel and CTE.
In Excel and CTE.
It will bounce over to tiered, non-tiered. No, that's
Right. So it's not, it isn't that they get 0. It's that they don't get that full calculated cost. They get 1/3.
Or 2/3.
If the student is from their county, and they get 2/3 if the student is from outside their county. So it's not an all or nothing.
Yeah.
Correct.
Down to
This would
0.
be the impact on Excel and CTE. And the other thing that is important to note, that when freshmen and sophomores, somebody not meeting all of these rules, bounce to tiered, non-tiered, they either get 1/3 or 2/3 of the cost, but the college never had the chance to charge them tuition,
Right.
which is now allowable. But the colleges also have to wait. So I know you're confused by the funding, but for traditional age college students, we pay 2 years behind. So these particular freshmen, sophomore that just completed their freshman or sophomore year last month or this month, the college would not see reimbursement for at minimum 2 years, but then on a 3-year average.
Right. They would be incorporated
that's
2 years from now into
How
the 3-year average.
data works and how enrollments versus payment years work.
Or how you're supposed to run a business that way, but
It's now we have at one point, just so you know, we did do live data collections where we paid out Excel and CTE. I know the colleges remember it. It was very painful. And so nothing's a perfect science. And what would happen when we had live data, we did several data collections in one particular year, the pie kept shifting. So maybe Cloud submitted X amount. When they resubmitted for the next semester, that adjusted lower. So now they had to give us money back so that we could pay Greg. So even that methodology had its flaws, unfortunately.
if there's supplemental, when do we find out?
We'd have had to do
This time next year. So when Vice President Frisbee first came on and you guys approved the FY26 supplemental, that was for 25 enrollments. Right, I'm not messing that up because I get confused.
You're right.
So it'd be this time next year.
Mike, comment?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on Ray's plumber bill. I dispute mine quite often. But maybe this clouds the water even more. And speaking of Cloud Community College. Amber, just out of curiosity, I would assume you or Greg have run the numbers. Let's say with Cloud on scenario 1 on page 80, you're almost 88,000 in the hole roughly. How much is made up in the tiered, non-tiered funding? Just out of curiosity.
Really, I mean, it'd be a third as
It would be at least a third, and it would also depend.
eventually.
Right.
Okay,
So,
Sure.
go ahead, Greg, because I was gonna
so
ask about.
a couple of
SWOT.
things. The green column on page 80,
Yeah,
that's averaging
Mhm.
freshmen, sophomores. So if Amber had no freshmen or sophomores, that probably would not be an accurate. So I want to make sure that's clear. This is an estimate.
right.
If you approve, don't make the assumption that that's the exact dollar amount.
Right.
But they're going to have to do some calculations in there. But if you're exactly at the percentage, then it should be, if they're in Cloud County enrollment, their high school is, they would have 1/3 of that amount 5 years later.
Right.
3, 4, and 5, averaged over those year 3, 4, and 5 out. If they are from, what's another county? Ottawa County. Ottawa County enrollment, they would get 2/3 reimbursed for that student 5 years later.
Okay.
That's a good point on the percentages, because the institution I'm familiar with, the only freshmen, sophomores are in CNA. And so I know that percentage is high for them. And it took me a while to figure that out.
Right.
So
And to your point, Member Bean, a lot of us have tried to do some of that calculating on our own just to predict down the road, because we're obviously getting ready to set our budgets and having budget study sessions with our own boards. And so I've gone through, because we have business, what does that look like over the last 3 years? How much would that be, freshman and sophomore? Ours are predominantly CNA. And so what does that look like? Are there alternatives for their students if they can't be eligible through Excel and CTE? But we have a ballpark of what that looks like.
Right. And to your point, Cindy, I mean, everybody was playing by the rules, let's say a year and a half ago, and last legislative session, the rules changed. And so now this is a reflection of those rules change, which is unfortunate, but it is the hand we're dealt with. And so.
But I just asking institutions, I assume you'd want us to make a decision today. I mean, you're preparing budgets for next year. I mean, we can kick the can down the road, but as a former president, I like to know when I'm putting budgets together.
I think, what I'm basing my budget off is the stuff I've ran, which is it's around 105. So these are both. And so it's a little bit more. So I'm budgeting based off of that just to be safe. If you look at some of those swings between the two, on one, there's maybe a $1 million decrease. And then on the next one, scenario 1, it shifts to 400,000, and that's a big shift for an institution. I'm not one of those institutions, so it's easy for me to say, well, I kind of know where I'm at. Hopefully that institution has done those similar calculations, because these are just scenarios that aren't final numbers. And so it's hard to say. Sure, it would be great to have a recommendation, because no matter what, you're going to have to be forced to prorate in some way until we can get a supplemental, if that's possible. But I don't know that it has to be decided today. Greg, you might feel differently.
No, right now I'm feeling the pain, honestly. This process, I'm fine with all of it, but as we kind of understand, there's only 36 million that I can look at and say, yeah, we got it. So when I'm looking at it, my hope is that it's easier to figure out what the 9th and 10th grade enrollment is, take that out and look at that from my standpoint with 36 million and then say, this is what we're going to get. Anything else I get above that, great. But I'm going to have to budget 36 and our portion of the 36. And I think a lot of the institutions are going to do that with the strong desire and hope to get that additional amount supplemented for FY20, for 27 this current year. But, well, I guess it starts July 1, but we're not planning on getting that money if we're smart in our fiscal, but I mean, our budgeting process. And my board hates that, because then when I come back and we got 150,000 more, or whatever our number was, 200 and some thousand more, then I can look good. I can be like, hey, one of my former board members used to get mad at me for that all the time. I'm like, I budget high expense, low revenue, always come back okay. But I'm not betting on anything more than 36. I just want the number that we're gonna get out of that 36.
Chris?
Thank you for that. This has been a really complicated, kind of winding conversation. All I can say that seems clear to me is that there's a couple hands that we've been dealt. It's the 36 million and then the bit about the freshmen and the sophomores. And if there's some pain that flows from that, I tend to think it ought to be shared evenly, because those two hands are done. The idea of pulling out the promise stuff sounds like we're imposing another judgment on on our plumbing bill, which I just don't approve of. It seems to me that we take what's happened here and evenly spread the consequences of it. So I'm not quite sure whether you need it or not, but I'd be prepared to vote or move that we had adopt scenario 1. I'm not sure what would happen that would change those really simple perspectives that I'm coming out of it.
So that is a motion?
Yes, sir.
Second,
I'll second that motion.
more discussion? Basically, you're saying the legislature said no freshman, sophomore, so that's scenario 1. Community college proposal does the non-promise, which was not in the legislative proposal, but it was something we recommended. But it's not in the law.
Ready to begin,
It's not
right?
in the law. So yours is a scenario 1. We have a second.
Yes.
I want to clarify scenario 1, page 80. Because technically scenario 2 came first in our packet. So
I know, that's what I was confused.
not-
Yes.
Page 80.
Yep.
So thanks for that clarification, because that was something I just wanted to make sure. So 77 is the community college proposal. Correct?
This.
Yeah, scenario 2
Yep.
is a community college proposal.
Right. And but that
And
scenario 1's what we just put a motion on.
yeah, and just one more comment here. So scenario 2 would be, this is a question, is more representative of the distribution based off of, I guess, funds committed or services provided. Am I accurate in saying?
Scenario 1 is representative of the services provided, funds committed, that would not yet take effect. It would be applying a recommendation from the TEA and the board to start last summer, if you will, versus starting this summer.
With the exception of the 9th and 10th.
With the exception of the 9th and the 10th graders and all of the factors that we weren't able to include at all. But this would be, the legislature did not include the requirement to put up the fence and say Excel and CTE should just be for promise programs. That was a recommendation from the TEA and the board, and that recommendation was always to do that in a forward-looking manner to ensure that a student who's already made a commitment can finish out what they're already doing. The legislative requirements like I said, I'm trying to think of a different way to say it, but it basically says, well, we decided in May what your requirements were for last July. And so either scenario has to take those out.
Yeah, understood.
Can I don't know where we are in
We're
the,
just in discussion mode.
Okay.
We've had a motion in a second.
okay. So, but the decrease of the monies that we're deciding for the 36 million is due to removing 9th and 10th graders. So it kind of makes sense to me to use scenario 2, right? That calculates in the 9th and 10th graders.
Well, we calculate in a factor for the 9th and 10th graders on both of them.
But, okay.
It's the same starting point for both.
But when you take it out in the pink,
mhm.
the pink is the proration of what 9th and 10th graders made of their total.
Not quite.
Okay.
The pink is the proration of that 6.9 million below the green column,
Mhm.
based on the institution's share of non-promise coursework that was delivered.
Okay, and then the scenario 1 takes that.
And the scenario 1 says, after we get down and we say our difference is the 6.9 million, then everybody shares that according to their portion of the total. So instead of looking at promise, it's shared somewhat equally. It's
Okay.
proportionate to their calculated share.
Charmin, is there any way, and it doesn't have to hold up our vote or anything, but can you estimate or take scenario 1 and take the 9th and 10th grade and what will go over to the tiered and see what the impact truly is? I get it, it's an estimate, but I mean, this is a big pain point, and I think we need to show what the universities are dealing with by not by making an assumption on their 9th and 10th graders, right? Okay, we're gonna shove it over to tier 1 and 2. They're gonna get a third of it or 2/3 of it, depending on where they're at. So be nice to see that estimate and what that true impact is gonna be based on the current funding levels, in making this decision.
I make a point real quick.
Sure.
We keep saying scenario 1 and scenario 2, and page 77 is actually scenario 2.
Right.
And page 80 is scenario 1. So
Right.
even our people are getting confused on
Yes.
which one you all are.
We should say
referring-
community college
Page
proposal
80.
and tech college.
Or just page
Yeah.
80 versus 77.
Page 80,
Page 80.
scenario 1, I think it was the tech college proposal.
And
This
this is food for your thought.
Okay.
We would retract scenario whatever, page 80, and support page 77 as a sector, because it does address what you talked about, which is forward thinking. And I think, sorry, I can't remember your name, and I'm too Ty, thank you. To your point, this is what the TEA is moving towards. So colleges that, if we're going to have to take, we don't want to take the cut. Don't get us wrong in that respect. And I think you are all supportive of us trying to get what we can. But if we're there, if we're only able to get 36 million, or even say they add 4 million instead of whatever, we need a representative response to that. And that's going to depend on the institution's experience in the column green with the freshmen, sophomores. So if I have 5 freshmen or sophomores enrolled, I shouldn't be cut equally across everything else if I never enrolled them. But at the same time, if I don't have a cosmetology program, I'm going to be cut from that scenario. So you got, I think page 77, you have more support from our sectors now than we thought initially. And we got confused with option 1, 2, or
And-
scenario
and
1,
just-
2.
You got a lot of red ink on the right columns on both pages.
Yeah.
But if you look at the losses,
Mhm.
in the community college pros proposal or tech college proposal, 14 community colleges will lose more than in their proposal, and 5 tech colleges would lose more
Right.
in that proposal. If you look at the community college proposal, it's only 14 of you would get more, and tech colleges, 3 of you get more, and there'd be 4 losers, but the losers are small,
That's-
2 to 6,000.
Right.
Now, there's a couple institutions, KCK, Flint Hills.
They're going to get hurt
Take a
more.
hit, whatever way you do it.
And
So just
That's the tough part of it.
for
So
clarity,
77 is what we would.
there, you're both in agreement on scenario 2, page 77.
say.
Yeah?
I say yes.
So we would either need to vote on the motion or if you would withdraw the motion.
I withdraw my second.
I don't know. Kind of left me out on the dance floor.
Sorry. Well, I was trying to figure out what, yeah, it's a mess.
I'm trying to figure out what happened.
I'm a little foggy on what's happened here too, but I
Yeah,
have
how
to say
did we get?
nothing you've just said addresses my gut
Mhm.
sense of what's going on here, which is that is kind of a change in the rules in the middle of the game. Some of the rules got
That's true.
changed beyond
And
our
we can't
control,
control that.
and we're dealing with them. This promising is in our control right now, and I don't approve of changing that rule in the middle of the game. I appreciate your point of view, and I obviously defer to it, but it doesn't change that sense of it. So I'd rather vote on the motion and have it voted down. I don't think I want to withdraw it.
So let me make sure I understand what your proposal or your motion was. For FY 27, this 36 million is going to be appropriated, and you have a barrier. You can't pay for freshmen or sophomores.
Right.
So that enrollment will move to non-tiered and tiered enrollment. So it's going to get partially paid for over a period of time. But if we have to take a cut and not get all of the other enrollment, so if you have a junior that's in a program that is not funded, that we know you're never going to get paid out on that one.
Yes, you will.
Yeah.
Okay, explain that.
It does the same thing. It will bump to tiered, non-tiered. Anyone who is not funded through Excel and C2E will be bumped to tiered, non-tiered. So it's the same thing
Thank
as
you.
freshman, sophomore.
That's what we want to make sure we're hearing.
Yes.
If they are bumped out of this, that there would be a third or 2/3 paid out over time. You still can't go back and charge the tuition for
last year.
the last years. So
Right.
Okay, that's why you've changed your position.
So to be clear, when you say bumped out, you mean on the basis of the non-promise shift here?
right.
Is that you're referring to that? Okay, well.
So then
So they'll get some money, basically.
right. And the fact that we weren't sure if, so the reason why we heard that they would agree is because they're not eligible as a 9th grader or a 10th grader to even get any funding in that bucket. But you can't really say that about a junior because the legislation didn't say you can't take cosmetology. So then we couldn't automatically assume that they would be not eligible for Excel and CTE. So our assumption is if you just prorate it across the board, okay, so we got to absorb something that we never even had the program. But now we're saying they can actually get funded through non-tiered and tiered. That changes those institutions' outlook. They're going to get cut in this particular year, but they will get additional funding. They're going to get cut if it's not funded here. But if they don't get funded, they'll roll into that tiered and non-tiered. That's what I'm hearing that we didn't hear before.
Every enrollment gets calculated for funding. It's just in different funding streams.
Right,
Yep.
right. But
And it
you
always
see my
has-
scenario for like
And it always-
junior, and if they're eligible for Excel and CTE and there's no money there, what happens?
They're eligible for Excel and CTE and there's no money there. So you would prorate That would be a proration situation instead of automatically kicking over, right? So your freshmen and sophomores are going to kick over to tiered and non-tiered because they don't have any eligibility for Excel and CTE. Somebody in a non-promise going forward will kick over to non-tiered automatically. But if you have a junior, if you have too many enrollments that are eligible for Excel and CTE, it will still require a prorate based on something.
Right.
Yep.
So that means that however you want to prorate it, you're only going to get funded 80% of each student or 80% of your students and the 20% don't get funded. However you want to look at that, those students are not getting funded from the state for Excel and CTE or a portion of the funding, whichever scenario you look at. If what the TEA moves to is page 77, then that percentage goes over to tiered and non-tiered. That's what I'm seeing the difference. A junior enrollment, if we're saying that they're in Promise or they're not in the Promise Act, we can roll that group over to tiered and non-tiered because you're saying they're not eligible for Excel and CTE. Then they will be funded under the tiered and non-tiered model versus being funded under Excel and have to cut across the board for everybody.
So I get it. I'm hearing what you're saying. And so my question is, if it's not legislated right now.
Correct.
These non-promised. So will that actually happen? Can we make that happen even though it's not legislated?
You can, in terms of saying what is eligible as a tiered program or what you're saying, the bucket of money that is Excel and CTE, this is the eligible expenditures for students in these programs. You have that authority, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think the TEA has that authority.
So basically then what I think I'm hearing you say is you would prefer to at least get some funding back on the non-promised as articulated here versus getting nothing back on a prorated model for the remainder of the funds.
I'm pretty confident yes, that's it.
Okay.
I'm pretty confident the legislature's not going to dump a whole bunch more. They may supplement, but they're not going to probably go all the way to 50 million.
Okay.
But if they do, great. Then you don't have anything to worry about because they would be shifted over to tiered and non-tiered and at least be funded at that level there.
Thank you.
So with due respect to the process you've gone through, your fellows came up with your proposal for scenario one. You're confident that this change would be representative of their point of view, or is this a next month thing?
Yes, is what I hear.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, they're going to be hurt in either scenario.
Right.
Most.
Right.
In our sector. And there are other players that will be hurt in either scenario. It's just how much pain can you endure? And I think in this case, it's less painful there.
Okay, Kurt.
But I will say, we didn't understand or know that we could shift junior and senior enrollment to tiered and non-tiered. I'm not saying K-Board didn't tell us. We didn't necessarily rationalize this whole process. As difficult as it is today, it's been difficult for months.
Well, it seems a little hard to press forward on a scenario that now neither camp advocates. So I'll withdraw my motion on the grounds of.
Thank you. I
confusion.
apologize.
Me too.
On behalf.
Next step, we do need a motion for
You can withdraw and then change it.
page 77, or we can delay. My opinion, we should go forward, but
I move for the proposal on page 77.
I'll second that. It's moved and seconded. Let's do a roll call vote. Somebody call that.
I'd also recommend that Salina Tech make up the $1 difference.
There you go.
That's fair.
Just kidding.
Go ahead.
We'll have
Paid to
have Jennifer go ahead and do it.
I paid my dues to you, buddy.
I'm sorry? Oh.
Ready?
Are we?
Member Frederick,
Aye.
Eden,
Aye.
Anderson. She's still on.
No, it was.
Hoover,
Aye.
McCulca,
Aye.
Rice,
Go. Aye.
Zimmer,
Aye. She said.
Bean,
Aye.
Angela White. Member Clark. Passes.
Yeah, I'm gonna call on Mike Bean to explain what we just did.
Well, it's a little cloudy as my initial comment. I do appreciate the community and tech colleges coming together on or agreeing on a proposal that is not favorable to anyone. But I do want to recognize their camaraderie in doing that and the ability to come together. So thank you.
Do you want to retract your statement about Palmer's?
No.
So motion passed, I assume.
Yes.
Moving on. President White, Vice President White, update on the PEA progress on goals for 2025-26.
So on page 81, you have all 7 goals that we set and the current status of each of those. Just a quick overview, we have made progress on advancing reporting under the new career cluster framework. You guys never see that, but it is something we have to do as a state. We have made progress on doing that. We've continued work with our military articulation, including having talking sessions with colleges to determine if the data submissions we have issues there. As you guys approved, we worked with the technical colleges on their operating grant, which is something we had to do. Adult Ed has also tried to strengthen their funding and expand opportunities with other parts of the sector. So they're working with obviously our Perkins programs. They're also working with many of the hospitals on upskilling people who are here legally able to work and getting them up to speed on where they need to be. So these are things to think about as we move forward. Maybe over the summer in August, we will have to set new goals for next academic year. We would take those now if you guys have specific goals, or if you want to think about it over the summer, you're more than welcome to. Everyone's
I
tired.
assume maybe nobody's ready to think about that yet and think about it over the summer. Do we need to approve anything?
Nope.
Okay. The next is the academic calendar.
Yep,
Meeting,
and in your packet, page 83, you will see the meeting schedule for next year, both the committees and the full TEA. We will work with whomever the next chair is on if the timing still works for both of those committees. We will also work with the new chair on assigning people to those committees. But the schedule is on purpose. While we have these specific dates, we have to back up from the Board of Regents meetings and their committees to then hit the TEA to meet our committee meetings. So that's how we set our schedule. Everything is set here to accommodate the board approval schedule for any items you push forward. So with that, I would take any questions or concerns about the current schedule. I know in October, we do have a conflict with possibly having a quorum. So that's something we'll work through next year. But with that, I'll take any questions or concerns. You need a vote.
Any questions on this agenda?
Nope.
Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the meeting schedule for next year. Any opposed? Motion passed. Finally, chair and vice chair for next year. I think I'm gonna turn it over to you, President or Vice President White.
And I would open the floor for if there are any recommendations for chair and vice chair for next year.
Is this
Yep.
already in play or does it need to be stated? I would like to nominate David as the chair and Ray Frederick as the vice chair. Academic year 2027.
I will second that nomination and move that nomination cease and we cast a unanimous ballot. No backing out.
So are we talking about calendar year or academic year?
Fiscal year.
If
Federal.
Seriously.
And
Last year.
and according to the length of our meetings, you may want to reconsider that.
It's 3 year.
I don't even know my name anymore. I took Greek in college. This is worse than Greek, I tell you, today.
Page 80, scenario one.
Yeah.
Save the best for last.
We have a motion and
Okay,
second.
so any opposed?
Can I think about it?
Nope.
Motion passed.
Congratulations.
If that's the right word. Got this at home.
That was good.
Set a new record.
That was, I think we did that.
Kind of one.
Oh.
Set.
Exactly.
Meeting